Imagine boarding your flight, settling into your seat in first class, only to be told you don't belong there. What would you do when the crew challenges your right to sit simply because of how you look? This is exactly what happened to Marcus Ellison, a calm, composed black CEO who chose to wear casual clothes and blend in on his own company's plane. But instead of respect, he faced suspicion, dismissal, and discrimination. What happens when power, dignity, and prejudice collide 30,000 feet above the ground? Will Marcus stay silent? Or will he use this moment to expose systemic bias inside one of America's fastest-growing airlines? How far will he go to hold the crew accountable and to force real, lasting change? This story isn't just about a seat on a plane. It's about identity, respect, and the fight against everyday injustice that millions face, but few have the platform to challenge. Get ready for a gripping journey of quiet strength, fierce dignity, and the transformative power of standing firm in who you are, no matter the cost. If you believe in justice and the power of change, smash that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe now to follow Marcus's story and many more real-life moments that matter. Let's dive in. The late afternoon sun spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of LAX Terminal 5, painting the polished tiles in warm amber. The boarding area for Sky Nova Flight 762 hummed with the usual blend of business chatter, rolling suitcases, and the occasional boarding announcement cutting through the air. Marcus Ellison adjusted the strap of his weathered leather backpack, the one he had carried through graduate school, through his first big corporate deal, through more airport lounges than he could count. Today, he wore faded jeans, a plain black hoodie, and sneakers that had seen better days. The clothes were chosen on purpose. He handed his boarding pass to the gate agent, who scanned it without a flicker of recognition and stepped into the jet bridge. The familiar scent hit him first, that blend of recycled air, faint disinfectant, and something vaguely metallic that every frequent flyer could identify instantly. The hum of the cabin air systems wrapped around him as he stepped onto the plane. Seat 2A waited for him, second row in first class, window seat. He stowed his backpack under the seat in front and slid into the leather chair, its headrest cool against his neck. It wasn't 2 minutes before a shadow fell across the aisle. "Sir, you need to move. The seat is reserved for our VIP passengers." The voice was crisp, the tone sharper than the words themselves. Marcus looked up to see a woman in a perfectly pressed navy uniform, name tag catching the overhead light Linda Carver. Her hair was swept into a tight chignon, makeup flawless, smile absent, her manicured finger pointed toward the back of the plane. Marcus blinked slowly, keeping his voice even. "I believe I'm in the correct seat, ma'am." Linda's lips pressed into a thin line. She stepped closer so her voice would carry less, but the aisle was narrow, and in first class, privacy was an illusion. Passengers in rows 1 and 3 turned their heads. "Some people think they can just sit anywhere they want," she said, her tone now laced with a certain condescension. "This is first class. Sir, your ticket is for the back." Marcus's fingers tapped once against the armrest. The white gold band on his left hand caught the light. He looked around briefly, registering the stairs, the quiet rustle of someone pulling out a phone. He reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out the neatly folded boarding pass, holding it between 2 fingers. "Here you go." Linda glanced at it a glance so quick it could hardly be called reading, then shook her head. "This doesn't look right," she announced. The volume was enough for the man in 1B to hear, and he leaned slightly into the aisle, curiosity mingling with something less charitable. "Tyler," she called toward the front. The co-pilot appeared moments later, tall and broad-shouldered in a crisp uniform that still looked fresh from training school. His nameplate read Tyler Brooks. "What's going on?" he asked, scanning Marcus like he was an unscheduled maintenance check. "Unauthorized passenger in first class," Linda said. "Claims he belongs here." Tyler's gaze traveled from Marcus's sneakers to the hoodie, lingering just long enough to make the point. "Sir, we have protocols about passenger seating assignments," he said. "Can you show me your receipt for this upgrade?" Marcus's eyes didn't flinch. "The seat was booked in advance. You should be able to verify it in your system." 3 rows back, a young woman with long black hair slipped a phone into her palm. Hannah Kim was a travel vlogger, though today she had planned to rest her voice and enjoy the flight. But the tone in Linda's voice, the way the co-pilot loomed, it felt wrong. She tapped to start a live stream. "This is wild," Hannah whispered to her growing audience. "They're basically accusing this man of stealing a seat based on how he looks." Linda crossed her arms. "Sir, I can tell by looking that you didn't pay for first class. This seat costs more than some people make in a month." The air in the cabin shifted. The man in 1B chuckled under his breath. Marcus sat still, feeling the weight of every gaze. His mind ticked through options: push back now, or let this unfold a little longer. His father's voice came to him from decades ago. "Never let them see you flinch." Tyler stepped closer, hands on hips. "We're trying to resolve this quietly, sir. Don't make it more difficult than it needs to be." Marcus tilted his head slightly. "You mean difficult for whom?" The pause stretched just long enough for Hannah's viewers to send a wave of comments. Linda pulled a small device from her pocket and began tapping. "Security to gate C-14, she said into the crew phone, her eyes never leaving Marcus. The announcement over the intercom followed seconds later. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a brief delay due to a passenger seating issue. We will be departing approximately 10 minutes behind schedule." 10 minutes. That was fine. Marcus had all the time in the world. He leaned back into his seat, his voice calm. "Perhaps you should verify my seat assignment through your system." Linda's smile this time was almost pitying. "I don't need to check anything. I can see." Marcus folded his hands in his lap. Somewhere deep inside, under the stillness, the tension coiled tighter. He knew how this would look in a few minutes. He also knew that some lessons had to be learned the hard way. Hannah's voice carried in a low whisper for her stream. "This is going to get interesting." The cabin settled into that brittle kind of quiet where everyone is waiting for the next move, and every breath, every sound feels amplified. Marcus stayed still. The storm could come to him. The cabin lights were steady and bright, but the mood had already shifted. People settled a little deeper into their seats. Eyes tracked every small movement. The quiet creak of the overhead bins sounded louder than it should have. Linda Carver stood with her weight on one heel, clipboard tucked against her ribs. She was close enough that Marcus Ellison could see the faint shimmer of powder on her cheekbones. "Calm, please," he told himself. "This is a test, for them and for me." "Sir," she said again, "the policy is clear. First class is reserved for premium passengers. If you cannot provide proof of purchase for this specific seat, I will need you to relocate to economy. We still have time to avoid a scene." It was not a request. It was a verdict. The man in 1B tilted his head, lips pressed into what might have been a smile. Robert Kane had the tidy look of a retired banker, silver hair, navy blazer, the kind of man who wore first class like a birthright. Marcus held her gaze and handed over the boarding pass a second time. "There is nothing to avoid, Mom. My name and seat number are there. You can verify it in your system. It will take less than a minute." Linda glanced at the paper and then at his face, as if the ink might change under her stare. She handed it back with 2 fingers. "I have seen this trick before. Printouts that look fine at a glance. Counterfeits. People try things." Tyler Brooks shifted his stance. The co-pilot towered over the aisle, shoulders squared. He looked very sure of himself. "Sir," he said in a tone meant to sound helpful, "we can escort you to your original seat and sort this out later. That would be the easiest path." "Easiest for who?" Marcus asked. "For the schedule or for the truth?" A soft "oh" floated from row 3 as a phone camera found focus. Hannah Kim had tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Her voice barely rose above a whisper, but the mic on her device caught every syllable. "We are live," she murmured. "The crew thinks this man does not belong in first." He is calm. They are not checking the computer. Comments lit up her screen like a fast river. "I knew it," said one. "Ask why they will not scan the system," said another. A chime sounded at the galley. Linda pivoted toward the jump seat intercom. She pressed the button with unnecessary force. "Captain, we may need assistance in the cabin. Passenger in 2A refusing to comply with seating instructions, requesting support." Marcus kept breathing. He let his hands rest on his knees, palms open. He let the silence do the work. "You have a manifest," he said quietly. "You have a passenger list. You have a system you trust enough to fly a metal tube across a continent. It can tell you where I belong." The man in 1B leaned forward now, eager. "Listen to the crew," he said. Voice just loud enough to carry. "Some people take advantage. I paid real money for this seat." Hannah angled her phone to frame Robert and then back to Marcus. She was not a reporter by training, but she knew a story when it unfolded 3 feet from her sneakers. Her heart thudded. Her voice stayed smooth. Viewers climbed past 300. A flashing row of hearts crawled up the screen. The chat moved too quickly to read. Linda turned back, chin slightly raised. "I have 15 years of experience," she said. "I know the look when someone is trying to game the system." The air dropped a degree. Marcus felt it like a small cold wave under his ribs. The line was not spoken, but it was present. The line about who belongs and who does not. He tipped his head, not in submission, but in thought. The right move now, the right timing. He could end this with a phone call and a title. He could also let it play out for one more beat to show them who they were on instinct. Tyler made a show of checking his watch. "We are already 10 minutes behind," he said. "We are trying to leave on time. Sir, please, if you do not move, I will need to request security." Marcus looked out the window at the faint blush of sunset pushing down behind the control tower. He remembered the first time someone told him he did not belong in a room he had built. The memory stirred and settled. He returned his eyes to Tyler. "I am not refusing to comply. I am refusing to validate an assumption. Check your system. From the forward galley, a low rumble of footsteps approached. Captain Gerald Foster emerged with the authority of long habit. His uniform had that careful neatness that never came from a new issue. His expression was composed. "What do we have?" he asked. Linda spoke first. "Unauthorized passenger in 2A. Claims first class. No proof of purchase for this seat. Refuses to move," Tyler added. "We have offered a simple solution, and he is making it difficult." The captain assessed Marcus. Casual clothes, no visible logo, calm eyes. He accepted the boarding pass and studied it longer than Linda had. He regarded the identification card Marcus offered next and took a breath no one else heard. The picture matched. The details were clean. He passed them back with a careful nod. He did not show his thought. "Sir," he said, "we can resolve this. May I ask for your patience while my crew follows procedure?" Marcus inclined his head. "Of course, procedure would be an excellent idea." There was a murmur from Coach, the restless sound of a large group tethered to one small drama. Someone called out, "Just check the computer." Another voice replied, "Rules are rules." A mother soothed a baby. The baby sighed and fell quiet again. The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are now experiencing a delay of approximately 15 minutes. Thank you for your patience." Hannah read a comment aloud in a whisper. "They do not want to check because they already decided," said the viewer. She felt a twist in her chest. She remembered her father in a suit being asked to step aside at a hotel counter while others walked past. She looked at Marcus. He sat like a held note, not tense, simply intact. Linda moved to block the aisle. She looked at Marcus like he was a lever that needed to be pushed into place. "If you do not relocate," she said, "I will have you removed. This is your last warning." "Removed," Marcus repeated softly. He let the word rest in the space between them. "For sitting in the seat printed on my pass, for asking you to check the manifest, for being calm while you raise your voice." The baby in Coach laughed at something private and pure. A tiny sound. Then silence returned. Tyler spoke again, impatience at the edge of his tone. "We have to go. Security is en route." Marcus felt the old instinct rise, that urge to finish a conflict with force, to outrank and outtalk and outmuscle. He smoothed it down. He looked at Linda. He looked at Tyler. He remembered his mother at a doorway, saying, "We cannot teach people what they refuse to learn, but we can hold a mirror long enough for the truth to find them." He said it once more, clearly. "Check the system." Hannah bit her lip. She could hear her own breath in the microphone. She saw the moment hesitation cracked Linda's certainty. A small twitch near the eye, a faint tremor in the hand. Officer Miguel Santos and Officer Laura Jensen stepped onto the plane. They did not stride. They did not puff their shoulders. They simply arrived with the quiet presence of people who had seen many versions of the same scene. "Afternoon," the officer said. "Who made the call?" Linda lifted her hand. "That would be me. The passenger is refusing to comply." Santos moved to Marcus. "Sir, can you explain Marcus offered the boarding pass and ID? My seat assignment is 2A. I have provided documentation. I have requested that the crew verify my seat through their system. They have declined to check." Santos turned his head. "Mom, have you checked the manifest?" Linda answered too quickly. "I do not need to check. I can see what is happening here." Jensen met her eyes. "The computer would tell us in seconds. The aisle held its breath. Linda looked at Tyler for a cue. Tyler looked at the captain. The captain stared at the bulkhead for one heartbeat. Then he gave the smallest nod. "Fine," Linda said. She moved toward the galley terminal. Her steps lacked the certainty of a minute ago. She keyed in her code and the login screen bloomed. She paused. Her fingers hovered. She typed Marcus Ellison. The system spun its small circle of time. Hannah whispered to her phone. "She is checking." Finally. Robert Kane shifted again in 1B. He rubbed a spot on his cuff as if polishing the fabric would polish the moment. The system chirped. A line of text appeared. Linda stared. She blinked. Her mouth opened. No sound came out. Jensen took one step closer. "What does it say?" Mom, Linda, did not answer. Captain Foster moved to the screen and read. His face changed by degrees, color pulling away as comprehension moved in. The cabin went perfectly still, like the instant before thunder. Marcus exhaled once. He did not smile. He did not gloat. He was not done with this moment. He simply waited for the truth to walk into the room where everyone could see it. In row 3, Hannah felt the chat surge past 1,000 viewers. A comment floated up in bright text. "If he belongs there, this is going to be the clip of the year." The captain stepped back from the galley. He cleared his throat. His voice, when it came, was steady. He looked at Marcus as if seeing him for the first time. "Sir," he said quietly, "would you mind standing for a moment?" Marcus rose. The leather seat sighed. His knees straightened. He set one hand lightly on the headrest in front of him and did not move. The captain faced the cabin. He did not yet speak the words. The words were in the screen and in his eyes and in the way Linda had folded into herself. But he would speak them, because procedure had finally met reality, and the flight was not going anywhere until it did. The hum of the air system was steady. But the cabin felt heavy with silence. Everyone could sense a shift. A few passengers leaned forward in their seats, as if they were at the edge of a play they couldn't stop watching. The tension was starting to harden into something else. Linda Carver stayed by the galley terminal, her back to most of the cabin, staring at the passenger manifest as if it might rewrite itself if she gave it long enough. Her hand rested lightly on the counter, knuckles pale. Tyler Brooks moved in next to her, scanning the screen. His eyes darted toward Marcus Ellison, then quickly away. From row 3, Hannah Kim held her phone angled just right. The live stream chat was moving so fast she barely caught the comments, but she could feel the energy from the flood of notifications. The number of viewers was climbing in real time. Words like discrimination and bias flashed across the screen, carried by strangers watching this unfold in 1,000 different living rooms. In 1B, Robert Kane shifted his legs and crossed his arms. "What's the holdup?" he called toward the galley. "We all know he's not supposed to be up here. Just move him so we can take off." Marcus stayed seated, his posture relaxed but his eyes focused. He had learned long ago that stillness could be more commanding than movement. He didn't need to raise his voice. The situation was doing all the amplifying for him. "Sir," Officer Miguel Santos said to Marcus, "from what I see, your documents are valid. At this point, it's on the crew to confirm your seat assignment in their system. That's all I've asked them to do." Marcus replied. His tone was even, almost gentle. "If they choose not to, that's a decision they're making in front of you, in front of everyone here, and in front of however many people are watching on her live stream. He nodded toward Hannah. Linda turned from the galley and stepped closer to Marcus. "You're making this unnecessarily difficult," she said, her voice tight. "We have a schedule to keep. Passengers in the back have connections to make. Imagine they'd prefer the delay be caused by following protocol," Marcus said, rather than by chasing someone out of a seat that was assigned to them. Tyler exhaled loudly, as though patience itself was a finite resource. "Mr. Ellison Marcus cut him off with a small lift of his hand. "Do you know why I'm not standing up and leaving this seat? It's because I've been in this exact situation before, on a different day, in a different city, and the person in your position back then made the same assumption you're making now. No one checked. No one apologized. They just moved me, and that was that." His eyes swept the first-class cabin, meeting the gazes of those willing to meet his. "Some of you might be thinking it's just a seat. It's not. It's the principle. If you can be removed from a place you belong without proof, without process, without respect, then the seat is just the start of what you'll lose." There was a ripple in the room. Even Robert Kane leaned back slightly, though his expression didn't soften. Hannah's live-stream chat lit up with comments. Someone wrote, "This guy is calm, but destroying them with logic." Another wrote, "Captain better speak up soon." Captain Gerald Foster cleared his throat. "Linda," he said, his voice low but carrying. "You've logged into the system. What does it say?" Linda's jaw flexed. "Captain, it shows his name, and the seat assignment." 2A, she said finally. A quiet gasp came from somewhere in row 4, and passenger type the captain pressed. Linda hesitated. Her voice dropped, but the cabin was too still for anyone to miss it. Owner evaluation. Hannah's camera caught the moment perfectly. Her chat box exploded. The captain's gaze shifted to Marcus. "Mr. Ellison," he said slowly. "I wasn't aware," Marcus stood then, unhurried, "of who I am." "That's fine. You had no reason to know." His voice stayed calm, but there was steel under it now. "What's not fine is making decisions about me without evidence. What's not fine is ignoring the tools at your disposal that would have resolved this 15 minutes ago." Linda's cheeks flushed a deep red. Tyler stared at the floor. "This is not just about me," Marcus said. "I can handle a few stares, a few assumptions. I've been doing it my whole life, but every time this happens to anyone, it's another small cut, and you can only take so many before you bleed out your sense of belonging." Officer Jensen broke the silence. "Well, now that the seating is confirmed, I think our work here is done." "Not quite," Marcus replied. He glanced at the captain. "I think we have more to discuss before this flight goes anywhere." He turned toward the rest of the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Marcus Ellison. I'm the CEO of Ellison Global Logistics, the parent company of Sky Nova Airlines. This aircraft, this crew, this brand, they are my responsibility. And right now, what's happening here is not the standard we promise our customers." The collective exhale from the passengers was almost audible. Hannah's viewer count spiked hard, her phone buzzing with new followers. Robert Kane's eyes widened, and for the first time he said nothing. Marcus stepped into the aisle, standing where everyone could see him. "I booked this seat weeks ago. I boarded without incident until your senior flight attendant decided, based solely on appearance, that I didn't belong here. The co-pilot supported her without checking the manifest, and the captain, until just now, deferred to that judgment. We've delayed this flight nearly 20 minutes not because of a seating error, but because of an assumption." The captain straightened, his mouth a firm line. "Mr. Ellison, I'll admit we should have checked immediately. That's on us." "Yes," Marcus said, "and the impact of this moment extends beyond today's delay. You have passengers watching. You have social media recording. You have the court of public opinion forming its verdict in real time. And more importantly, you have a responsibility to treat every passenger with equal respect, regardless of what they're wearing or what you think they can afford." The captain nodded once. "Understood." Marcus turned to Linda. "You've been with this airline a long time. I assume 15 years, she said quietly. "And in that time, have you ever considered that your instincts might be shaped by something other than the facts in front of you?" Her eyes flicked away. "I thought I was protecting the seat, protecting the company." "No," Marcus said, his tone gentle but unyielding. "You were protecting your assumptions, and those assumptions cost us time, trust, and credibility today." The engines hummed faintly in the background, a reminder that the flight had yet to move an inch. Marcus returned to his seat. "We'll talk more about this before we take off," he said to the captain. "Right now, let's make sure everyone on this flight knows that the only thing determining where you sit is your ticket." There was a murmur of agreement from somewhere in coach. Hannah kept her camera steady. "This," she whispered into the mic, "is about to get very interesting." The jet bridge door opened again, and 2 uniformed officers stepped into the cabin. Their presence drew every set of eyes. Officer Miguel Santos led the way, his broad frame moving with unhurried authority, while Officer Laura Jensen followed, scanning the rows with a calm precision that spoke of experience. The sight of them shifted the air in the cabin from tense curiosity to expectant silence. Santos stopped just short of Marcus's row. "Good afternoon, folks. We were called about a seating dispute," he said in a measured voice, one hand resting lightly on the back of a seat. "Can someone tell me what's going on?" Linda Carver straightened as if she'd been waiting for this exact moment. "That man," she said, pointing toward Marcus, "is in a seat he didn't pay for. He refuses to move to his proper place in economy despite repeated instructions." Marcus didn't flinch. "Officer, my name is Marcus Ellison. My boarding pass clearly states this seat 2A was assigned to me. I have given the crew my pass and identification. I've also asked them to confirm the assignment in their own system. They have declined to do so." Jensen glanced at Linda. "Is that correct, ma'am? Have you checked the manifest?" Linda's chin lifted a fraction. "I don't need to check. I've seen situations like this before. I can tell when Santos raised a hand. With respect, ma'am, that's not how we operate. The manifest is the authority here, not instinct." From her row, Hannah Kim shifted her phone slightly to get a better angle. Her live stream chat exploded with comments cops just told her to check the manifest. This is about to blow up. Viewer count ticked upward 1,000. 2,000 numbers spinning like a meter left running. Robert Kane muttered something under his breath, but the microphone on Hannah's phone was sharp enough to catch it. What a waste of time. Just get him out. The chat window lit with angry emojis and sharp replies from viewers. Jensen addressed Marcus. "Sir, do you have your documents on you now?" Marcus handed over his boarding pass and ID without hesitation. Jensen studied them carefully, her eyes scanning the barcode and the printed details. She returned them with a small nod. "These are valid," she said to Santos. "Then all that's left," Santos said, looking at Linda, "is to confirm it in your system. Where's your terminal?" Linda hesitated. "In the galley." "Let's do it," Santos said, his tone still professional but edged with finality. Linda moved toward the galley, each step slower than the one before. Tyler Brooks stood beside her, his jaw tight. Captain Gerald Foster watched from the doorway of the cockpit, his expression unreadable. At the galley, Linda keyed in her credentials. The small screen glowed, displaying the manifest interface. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Hannah whispered into her phone, "She's doing it." Finally. The viewers held their breath in digital silence. Linda typed the name Marcus Ellison. The system's spinning icon appeared, turning once, twice, 3 times. Then the line of text appeared. Her eyes tracked it once. Then again, Marcus Ellison, Seat 2A, Passenger Type Owner Evaluation, Sky Nova Airlines, Parent Company, Ellison Global Logistics. Linda's face drained of color. Tyler leaned in to read it for himself, and his mouth opened slightly before he turned away. Captain Foster stepped forward. Ma'am Linda swallowed. It confirms his seat." And the captain pressed. She forced the words out. "Owner evaluation." A murmur ran through the cabin. Hannah's phone buzzed in her palm as the viewer count spiked past 3,000. "He owns the airline." A comment screamed across her chat. Santos turned to Marcus. "Sir, does that mean yes?" Marcus said calmly. "This aircraft and this airline are part of my company's portfolio. I'm conducting an unannounced assessment of in-flight service and crew conduct." Hannah's camera caught the exact moment the power dynamic in the cabin shifted. Passengers leaned back, some exchanging incredulous looks, others reaching for their phones. Robert Kane's mouth worked, but no words came out. Marcus stepped into the aisle so he could address both the officers and the crew. "I dressed casually today on purpose. I wanted to see if our crew could treat every passenger with the same professionalism, regardless of appearance. What I've seen so far is disappointing." Captain Foster's jaw tightened. "Mr. Ellison, I had no idea you weren't meant to," Marcus said. "But what you should have done was follow procedure, check the manifest, verify the facts. That should happen for every passenger, whether they're in jeans or a 3-piece suit." Linda's shoulders sagged. "Sir, I thought that's exactly the problem," Marcus said. "You thought instead of checking." The silence that followed was thick, pressing in on everyone. Even the officers stayed quiet. Marcus turned back to Santos and Jensen. "Thank you for your professionalism. Your part in this is done. I'll handle it from here as an internal company matter." Santos nodded, understanding the boundaries of corporate authority. "Understood, sir. We'll step out." As they left the aircraft, Hannah whispered to her viewers, "Guys, you just saw it. He's the CEO. This is insane." The chat poured out a stream of exclamation marks and fire emojis. Marcus faced the captain, the co-pilot, and the senior flight attendant. "We will have a conversation before this flight moves another inch. Passengers deserve to know they'll be treated fairly. That starts with accountability right here, right now." He returned to his seat with unhurried steps, the quiet authority of someone entirely in control. The leather creaked softly as he sat, but the sound seemed to carry through the entire cabin. Hannah's camera stayed trained on him. Her voice was steady but tinged with awe. "This story's not over," she told her viewers. It's just getting started." The cabin seemed to hold its breath. Even the soft hum of the ventilation system felt quieter, like the plane itself was listening. Marcus Ellison stayed seated, his posture calm but unmistakably in control. Linda Carver stood frozen by the galley terminal, the glow of the small monitor painting her face in a pale light. She had read the words once, twice, and then again, as if repetition might somehow alter the reality staring back at her. Captain Gerald Foster moved closer, the measured steps of a man used to command but suddenly aware he'd lost it. "Ma'am," he said, his voice low but firm. "What does the manifest say?" Linda's throat worked as she swallowed. "Marcus Ellison, Seat 2A, Owner Evaluation, Ellison Global Logistics." The murmurs began instantly. A woman in row 4 gasped. Someone in row 5 whispered, "He owns the airline." The sound traveled in ripples through first class and down the aisle into coach, where passengers craned their necks to catch a glimpse. Tyler Brooks shifted his stance, trying to mask the flush rising up his neck. His eyes flicked between Marcus and the captain, the way a junior officer might look for orders after realizing he'd backed the wrong play. Marcus rose slowly from his seat, the leather sign under him. He didn't raise his voice, but the natural authority in his tone carried to every corner of the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I apologize for the delay. My name is Marcus Ellison, and I am the CEO of Ellison Global Logistics, the parent company of Sky Nova Airlines." Hannah Kim's phone caught every word. Her viewer count leapt like a heartbeat under stress 3,000, 4,000 comments pouring in faster than she could read. She held her phone steady, her pulse matching the surge in her chat. "This flight," Marcus continued, "was part of an unannounced evaluation. Over the last several months, Sky Nova has received an increasing number of passenger complaints about bias and unequal treatment on certain routes. This particular route, Los Angeles to New York, has been mentioned more than any other." He let that hang for a moment, the truth settling into the room. "I came here today to see for myself how our crew handles passengers without any status cues, no suit, no briefcase, no assistant walking me to the gate, just a man with a ticket." Robert Kane shifted uncomfortably in 1B. He avoided Marcus's eyes. Marcus looked directly at Linda, and what I experienced was a decision made about me, based not on the boarding pass I handed you, but on what you thought you saw. You didn't check the manifest. You didn't verify in the system. You acted on an assumption, and then defended that assumption even when it delayed this flight and called in airport security. Linda's voice was small now. "Sir, I didn't know who you were. That," Marcus said, "is precisely the point. You don't need to know who a passenger is to treat them with respect. You shouldn't treat anyone differently because you think you can tell their status just by looking." Captain Foster spoke up. "Mr. Ellison, I'll admit I should have stepped in sooner to check the facts. That's on me." Marcus nodded once. Acknowledgement is the first step, but as the captain, you set the tone for your crew. Your initial reaction was to support your staff without verifying the evidence. In aviation, procedure exists for a reason. You don't skip it because someone sounds confident in their claim. Tyler's jaw tightened. He kept his eyes forward, but the weight of Marcus's words was evident in the slight sag of his shoulders. "This isn't just about embarrassment," Marcus said to the cabin at large. "Incidents like this can cost airlines millions in lawsuits, lost customers, and damage to reputation. But beyond the dollars, They cost something far greater trust. And once that's gone, it's hard to earn back. Hannah's live stream chat was now a storm of reactions. People were tagging news outlets, demanding this be picked up by major networks. Some were already calling it the Sky Nova incident. Marcus glanced at her phone, noting the scrolling flood of comments. "It seems the world is already watching," he said quietly, "and that means we have a responsibility to handle this the right way." He turned back to Linda. 15 years with this airline." "Yes, sir," she said, eyes downcast. "Then you know better. Or, at least, you should. I'm going to give you the chance to correct this, not just for yourself, but for every passenger you serve going forward. That will be a conversation we'll finish before we take off." The captain cleared his throat. "Mr. Ellison, the passengers have been patient." Marcus finished for him, "and they deserve the truth about why we're still sitting here. This wasn't a problem with a boarding pass. This was a problem with judgment. And judgment is something we can change if we're willing to confront it." He sat back down, his presence still filling the space. "Captain, when you're ready, we'll talk about immediate steps to ensure this doesn't happen again." Foster nodded stiffly. "Yes, sir." Hannah lowered her phone for the first time in nearly half an hour, shaking her head. "I've been covering travel stories for years," she murmured to herself, "but I've never seen something like this play out in real time." A woman across the aisle leaned toward Marcus. "Good for you," she said in a low voice. "I've seen people get treated badly on flights before, but no one ever holds them accountable." Marcus gave her a polite nod. "It's not about revenge," he said. "It's about making sure the next person doesn't have to go through it." The engines remained quiet, the cabin still idling at the gate. Outside the window, the sun dipped lower toward the horizon, painting streaks of orange and gold across the tarmac. The passengers settled back into their seats, waiting for whatever came next. In the cockpit doorway, the captain and Tyler exchanged a few low words. Linda lingered by the galley, her eyes fixed on the floor, the earlier edge in her voice gone. Marcus leaned back, his hands resting on his knees. The real work was about to begin. The moment Marcus Ellison sat back down, the energy in the cabin was completely different from when he first boarded. A few minutes earlier, every glance at him had carried suspicion, curiosity, or quiet judgment. Now, those same eyes followed him with a mixture of respect, shock, and on the part of the crew unease. Hannah Kim adjusted her phone's position, making sure to capture Marcus in frame as he rested in his seat. Her live stream comments were moving so fast that she could barely make out specific words. But certain ones kept flashing: CEO, owns the airline. Unbelievable. Captain Gerald Foster took 2 slow steps toward Marcus, his voice steady but his eyes sharp. "Mr. Ellison, may I speak with you privately in the galley?" Marcus didn't move right away. He kept his tone even, but there was no mistaking the authority in his reply. "If it's about resolving what just happened, I think it's better for everyone here to hear it. Transparency will help the crew learn from this and help the passengers understand why we've been delayed." The captain hesitated. He wasn't used to having his authority questioned, especially not in front of a cabin full of passengers. "Very well," he said, straightening his shoulders. Marcus stood, this time carrying his leather portfolio with him. He stepped into the space between first class and the galley, turning so both the crew and passengers could see him. "Before we continue," he began, I'd like to make one thing clear. This is not a personal attack on any one crew member. This is about the culture we build and the standards we uphold. Linda Carver shifted her weight from one foot to the other, her eyes darting between Marcus and the floor. Tyler Brooks kept his gaze locked forward, jaw tight. I've reviewed enough incident reports to know, Marcus continued, that what happened to me today is not isolated. Over the last 3 months, this airline has received 17 formal complaints about biased treatment based on appearance. In each case, the passenger was challenged without the manifest being checked first. Some were moved, some missed connections, and some left our airline for good. A murmur traveled through the cabin. Hannah's viewers filled the chat with messages like, "This is systemic and he's got receipts." Marcus tapped the portfolio lightly against his hand. "I'm here today to evaluate in real time, to see how our policies play out when no one knows the boss is watching. The results so far." He paused, letting the weight of silence press in, "are unacceptable." Linda's voice was barely above a whisper. "Sir, if I had known that's exactly the problem," Marcus interrupted gently but firmly. "You shouldn't have to know who a passenger is to treat them with fairness and respect. Your first duty is to verify facts, not act on assumptions." He turned his gaze to Tyler. "As co-pilot, you're not just here to fly the plane. You're a leader in this cabin. When you chose to stand over me, to insist I move without evidence, you reinforced a mistake instead of correcting it. That's not leadership. That's compliance with bias." Tyler's mouth opened, then closed. His cheeks flushed, but he said nothing. Marcus looked at the captain. "And you, Captain Foster, you've built a strong record in 30 years of service. But today, you supported your crew's judgment without reviewing the evidence yourself. In aviation, procedure exists for a reason. You'd never skip a pre-flight checklist because someone had a feeling the plane was fine. The same principle applies to people." Foster nodded once, a sharp, almost military motion. "Understood." Marcus opened the portfolio. Inside was a sleek tablet, the screen glowing with a dashboard of data. "Here's what I know. Every incident like this costs us, not just in refunds or fines, but in public trust. And as of this moment, the public is watching." He nodded toward Hannah's phone. "Every passenger here is a witness. Every viewer on that live stream is a potential customer or someone who will never fly with us again." Hannah's viewer count ticked past 5,000. The chat was a wall of fire emojis, applause icons, and demands for Sky Nova to change its policies. Marcus held the tablet up briefly so the crew could see. "These are the latest satisfaction metrics. Over the last quarter, our rating dropped from 4.2 to 3.6 out of 5. That's a 14% decline in 90 days. Do you know what the number one complaint was?" He looked from Linda to Tyler to the captain. Not delays, not lost luggage, not food quality. It was feeling unwelcome. The words hung in the air like a verdict. Robert Kane in 1B shifted uncomfortably, avoiding Marcus's gaze. A woman in row 2 gave a small nod of agreement. "This isn't about punishing people for one mistake," Marcus said, "but about making sure that mistake doesn't happen again. And the only way to do that is to address it right now, in real time." Linda swallowed hard. "Sir, I understand. I'll do whatever training is necessary." "You will," Marcus said, his voice still calm but resolute. "But first, we'll discuss exactly how we got here. We'll break down every step that should have been taken and wasn't." And we'll make sure everyone in this cabin knows the difference between enforcing policy and enforcing prejudice." He turned to face the passengers fully. "You've all been patient. I appreciate that. You've also just witnessed something most people never see: accountability in action. We will finish this conversation quickly, so we can get you to your destination. But know this: the changes that begin today will outlast this flight." A ripple of applause broke out in the cabin. It wasn't loud or prolonged, but it carried sincerity. Hannah's viewers filled the chat with clapping emojis, many typing, "This is how it's done." Marcus returned to his seat. The captain stepped back toward the cockpit, glancing once at Tyler as if to signal a private talk later. Linda remained by the galley, shoulders slightly hunched, the earlier edge in her stance gone. Hannah lowered her phone for just a moment and exhaled. "That," she whispered, "is the moment everything turned." The seatbelt sign was still off, the cabin still at the gate, but the atmosphere was unlike any boarding Marcus Ellison had ever experienced. Every passenger knew something rare was happening. You could hear it in the stillness, in the way even the most restless traveler sat forward instead of reaching for their phone or book. Marcus leaned slightly into the aisle, his portfolio balanced on his knee. He tapped the tablet screen, and a new set of charts appeared clean, color-coded graphs that showed more than numbers. They told a story. "Let's talk specifics," he began, his voice pitched just loud enough for both the crew and passengers to hear clearly. "In the past 90 days, we've had 17 confirmed bias-related complaints on SkyNova flights. That's just the ones passengers took the time to submit. 12 of those involved cabin crew challenging a passenger's right to their assigned seat without verifying the manifest first. Of those 12, 5 were filed against you. Ms. Carver." Linda Carver's cheeks flushed a deep pink. Her hands, clasped in front of her, tightened almost imperceptibly. "Sir, I wasn't aware." "That's the point," Marcus said, cutting her off gently but firmly. "You didn't track it, you didn't reflect on it, and no one in management flagged it, which means our system failed you too. Bias isn't always conscious, but it has conscious consequences." He swiped the screen again. "Mr. Brooks," he said, turning to the co-pilot, "you've been named in 3 reports for improper passenger challenges in the last quarter. Each time, you were acting as a secondary authority to a senior attendant. That means you had the opportunity to break the chain of assumption and you didn't." Tyler Brooks shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. "I thought I was supporting my team." "Sir." Marcus held his gaze. "Support means helping your team make the right call, not doubling down on a bad one. You don't get points for loyalty if it comes at the expense of fairness." He turned his attention to Captain Gerald Foster. "Your record until today is strong. You've handled difficult situations with professionalism for 3 decades. But today, you supported your crew without checking the evidence. As captain, your signature carries legal weight. You know better than anyone that procedure protects everyone, crew and passengers alike." Foster nodded once. "I should have verified before I made a judgment. I own that." Marcus paused, letting the silence draw out for a few beats. His voice softened slightly, but the steel was still there. "My mother used to tell me, never let someone else decide your worth for you." She said it after she'd been made to wait outside a hotel lobby, while others, dressed differently, walked straight in. She never raised her voice that day. She didn't have to. The look in her eyes told me that dignity isn't about volume. It's about refusing to let anyone rewrite your story. He looked around the cabin, meeting the eyes of as many passengers as he could. That's why I stayed in my seat today. Not because I wanted to make a scene, but because I wanted to make a point. Hannah Kim kept her camera locked on Marcus, her viewers flooding the chat with applause emojis and comments like, "This man is teaching a masterclass right now." Her follower count was jumping in real time, but she barely glanced at the numbers. Marcus set the tablet down on the armrest. "Here's what's going to happen. Linda, Tyler, you both will have a choice. You can resign effective immediately for cause, with no severance and a permanent note in your employment file. Or you can agree to a mandatory 40-hour bias recognition and sensitivity training program through the National Civil Rights Institute, followed by a probationary period where every passenger interaction you handle will be reviewed. If you complete it successfully, you can return to your roles." Linda's voice trembled. "Sir, I'll take the training. I don't want this to be the end of my career. I want to do better." Tyler nodded quickly. "Training as well. I understand now how this looked, how it was. I can do better, too." Marcus inclined his head slightly. "Good. Acknowledgement is step 1, change is step 2, and step 2 takes work." He looked at the captain. "As for you, Captain Foster, your leadership is critical to the culture in this cabin. You will take a 30-day unpaid suspension, during which you'll complete advanced crew resource management training with a focus on bias prevention. Your return to duty will be contingent on a satisfactory evaluation." Foster's jaw tightened, but he gave a slow nod. "Understood, sir." Marcus turned toward the passengers. "You've seen how a single assumption can delay a flight, divide a cabin, and put our reputation at risk. You've also seen how it can be addressed without shouting, without hostility, and without sweeping it under the rug. This is what accountability looks like. It's uncomfortable. It's necessary." A smattering of applause broke out, building for a few seconds before fading into the hum of the cabin. Hannah's viewers sent waves of heart emojis across her screen. Marcus leaned back in his seat but didn't relax completely. There was more to do before they left the ground. "I'm going to introduce new company policies before we take off," he said, mostly to himself but loud enough for Hannah's mic to pick it up. "And they're going to stick." Hannah glanced down at her phone, her eyebrows lifting. "You're trending," she said softly. "Number 4 in the country right now." Marcus allowed himself the smallest of smiles. "Then we'll use that attention to make something better out of this mess." The captain stepped back toward the cockpit, speaking quietly to a flight attendant from economy who had been hovering in the galley, clearly listening to every word. Linda stayed near her jump seat, her hands clasped, her eyes on the floor. Tyler retreated toward the forward door, glancing out at the jet bridge as if it might offer an escape from the heat in the cabin. Marcus took a deep breath. In his mind, he replayed the moments from the last 30 minutes, the look on Linda's face when she first saw him, the tone in Tyler's voice, the captain's initial deference. These weren't just isolated actions, they were symptoms of something deeper. And if he left it alone, they'd happen again to someone else. "Not on my watch," he thought. Marcus Ellison adjusted the tablet on his lap, the glow from the screen casting a pale light on his steady expression. He could feel every eye in the cabin on him, and that was exactly how he wanted it. Moments like this only mattered if they were witnessed. "Here's what happens next," Marcus said, his voice low and controlled, but carrying through the hushed rouse. "We will not take off until every person in this cabin, crew included, understands the new standards we will put in place starting tonight." He tapped the screen, and a bulleted list appeared. First, quarterly bias awareness training will be mandatory for all Sky Nova crew members. This isn't a one-time seminar to check a box. It will be an ongoing program with measurable outcomes. If you fail the evaluation, you do not fly. A passenger in row 2 murmured approval. From her seat in row 3, Hannah Kim kept her camera fixed on Marcus. Her livestream comments lit up, "This is groundbreaking. Wish more companies did this." Second, Marcus continued, "An anonymous passenger feedback system will be available on every flight. QR codes will be printed on the back of every seat. Any passenger can report a concern in real time, and corporate will be required to respond within 4 hours." Linda Carver shifted in her jump seat. Marcus's eyes flicked to her. Third, diversity and inclusion performance will account for 25% of every management-level performance review. Promotions will depend on it. Bonuses will depend on it. Your ability to treat passengers fairly is as important as your ability to meet revenue goals. Tyler Brooks glanced toward the cockpit, but Marcus kept going. Fourth, any employee with more than 2 verified bias-related complaints in a 6-month period will be removed from duty for retraining. Repeat offenders will be dismissed permanently. He paused to let the weight of that sink in. A low murmur passed through the cabin. Some passengers exchanged glances. Others nodded subtly. Fifth, Marcus said, Sky Nova will partner with the National Civil Rights Institute to build industry-leading anti-discrimination protocols. These will become the standard for our airline, and I expect other carriers to follow. Hannah's viewer count jumped again, now over 6,000. In her chat, people were already tagging news networks. Comments streamed in. "He's changing the industry on the spot. This is what leadership looks like." Marcus leaned back slightly, scanning the cabin. These changes aren't for show. They are to make sure no passenger ever feels unwelcome in a seat they rightfully paid for. They are to ensure that the way we treat our customers matches the pride we take in our brand. Captain Gerald Foster stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Mr. Ellison, I accept these policies and will enforce them with my crew. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry for how I handled this." Marcus gave him a small nod. Acknowledged. "What matters now is what happens next." He turned to Linda. "Ms. Carver, your agreement to training is on record. You'll begin within the week. I want you to understand something. This isn't about punishing you. It's about making sure that when a passenger sits down, you see a person first, not a stereotype." Linda's voice was soft. "Yes, sir, I understand." Marcus looked at Tyler. "And you, Mr. Brooks, your role as co-pilot gives you authority. That authority must be used to uphold fairness, not to reinforce an error. Learn from this." Tyler nodded once, the stiffness in his posture betraying his discomfort. "I will, sir." Marcus exhaled slowly and turned his attention back to the passengers. "For your patience today, Sky Nova will be issuing full fare refunds for this flight. Additionally, each of you will receive a travel voucher for a future trip. This delay was caused by our failure, not yours." That drew a wave of applause. A few people even smiled. Hannah lowered her phone for a second and mouthed, "Wow." She had covered corporate missteps before, but never one that transformed mid-crisis into a real-time reform session. Marcus glanced at the clock on the bulkhead. Nearly 40 minutes had passed since boarding should have ended. "Captain, once we complete the paperwork for these changes and confirm the passenger refunds, we can depart. But make no mistake, this conversation doesn't end when we land. It's the first step." Foster nodded and headed back toward the cockpit, already relaying instructions over the intercom. As the bustle of last-minute preparations filled the background, Marcus leaned back in his seat. The adrenaline in his system hadn't fully burned off, but he felt the clarity that came from decisive action. He had turned a humiliating assumption into an opportunity for sweeping change, and the proof was not just in the new policies, but in the eyes of the passengers who had witnessed it. Robert Kane in 1B kept his gaze fixed out the window. He hadn't said a word since the reveal, but Marcus noticed the way the older man's posture had shifted, less confrontational, more guarded. That was fine. Change started with discomfort. Hannah checked her phone and caught Marcus's eye. "You're going to be everywhere by tonight," she said quietly. Marcus gave a faint smile. "Good. Then the message will travel farther than this plane." Outside, the tarmac glowed in the warm wash of late afternoon light. Inside, the mood was lighter, though still tinged with the awareness that something significant had just taken place. Passengers were talking again, this time to each other, about policies, about fairness, about the strange feeling of watching history happen on a routine flight. The intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We'll be departing shortly. Please take your seats and prepare for takeoff." Marcus set the tablet aside and fastened his seatbelt. The leather creaked softly under him, a sound that now felt like a small victory. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the low rumble of the engines fill his senses. He knew that what had happened today would ripple far beyond this cabin, and that was exactly the point. The safety demonstration began. But, for once, hardly anyone was paying attention to the gestures and seatbelt clicks. Passengers were still glancing toward Marcus Ellison, as though he might stand up again at any moment and make another announcement. The cabin crew moved down the aisle with a noticeably different posture. Even Linda Carver's voice, when she asked a passenger in row 5 if they wanted a blanket, had softened. As the engines roared and the aircraft lifted from the tarmac, Marcus leaned back into his seat, feeling the subtle shift as gravity gave way to the climb. The noise in the cabin quieted to the low rumble of the engines and the occasional clink of glassware from the galley. Hannah Kim's phone was still in her hand. Though she had stopped live streaming, she'd posted a quick summary to her followers. CEO disguised as regular passenger gets profiled, changes airline policy mid-flight. Full video coming soon. She knew her notifications would be relentless for the rest of the night. Marcus glanced across the aisle at Robert Kane. The man stared straight ahead, eyes fixed on the back of the seat in front of him. Marcus could sense the discomfort radiating from him, not the kind born of embarrassment for himself, but the kind that came when a long-held certainty had been challenged. The seatbelt sign turned off with a chime. Marcus unfastened his belt, but he didn't move from his seat. He took a slow sip of water, his mind already working through the next steps after landing. There would be press calls, an internal memo to all Sky Nova staff, and follow-up with the National Civil Rights Institute to formalize the partnership he had just announced. A flight attendant from the economy section, a young man with dark hair and a warm smile, stepped into first class. He leaned down slightly toward Marcus. "Sir, I just wanted to say thank you. I've seen things happen on flights that never get addressed. What you did today, it means something." Marcus offered a small nod. "What's your name, Evan?" "Sir?" "Evan. Remember, this speaking up doesn't always mean raising your voice. Sometimes it's about refusing to look away when something's wrong." Evan smiled, a little uncertain but grateful, and returned to the back of the plane. Linda passed by a moment later with a tray of drinks. She paused at Marcus's row, her expression carefully neutral. "Water, coffee?" "I'm fine, thank you," Marcus said. There was no malice in his tone, but there was no invitation either. She nodded once and moved on. Hannah leaned toward Marcus from across the aisle. "They're all walking on eggshells now," she whispered. "They'll find their balance," Marcus replied. "If they're willing to learn, they'll be stronger for it." The next hour passed in a quieter rhythm. Some passengers worked on laptops, others read or watched in-flight movies, but the earlier tension hadn't entirely faded. It had simply settled into something more reflective. Marcus could see it in the way people glanced at each other, more curious now than judgmental. About halfway through the flight, Captain Gerald Foster made an announcement over the intercom. His voice was measured, almost formal. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. Earlier today, we experienced a delay due to a seating dispute. That matter has been resolved, and I want to personally thank you for your patience. Skynova Airlines is committed to ensuring that every passenger receives equal and respectful treatment. We appreciate your business and hope the rest of your flight is comfortable." It wasn't a perfect statement, but Marcus appreciated the effort. For a captain who had begun the flight by backing his crew without evidence, it was a step toward ownership. The cabin settled again. Hannah had put her phone away entirely now and was jotting notes in a small spiral-bound notebook. She glanced up at Marcus. "Do you think they'll actually follow through with what you said?" "They will," Marcus said without hesitation, "because I'll make sure of it. And now there are thousands of people who saw it happen. They'll make sure, too." When the flight attendants began the meal service, Marcus declined politely, preferring to keep his focus. Instead, he opened his tablet again and began typing a draft email to his executive team. Effective, immediately implement announced reforms fleet-wide. Prepare training modules. Coordinate with Civil Rights Institute. Notify HR and PR. This incident will be addressed internally and publicly within 24 hours. He saved the draft, then closed the tablet and let himself breathe for a moment. Out the window, the horizon stretched in a deep band of orange and purple, the sun setting behind the plane as they crossed into the Midwest. A few rows back, a passenger stood and walked forward. She was middle-aged, with kind eyes and a steady voice. "Mr. Ellison, I just wanted to say I admire how you handled yourself. You didn't yell. You didn't insult anyone. You just kept your ground. That's rare." Marcus smiled faintly. "It's not about winning an argument. It's about changing the next one before it starts." She nodded, touched his arm lightly, and returned to her seat. The rest of the flight moved without incident. Drinks were served, trays were collected, and the cabin lights dimmed to a soft glow. Marcus closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to picture the work ahead, training schedules, leadership briefings, public statements. He knew the hardest part wouldn't be crafting the policies. It would be holding people to them when no one was watching. As the plane began its descent toward New York, Marcus fastened his seatbelt and glanced at Hannah. "You'll post the full video tonight. First thing after we land," she said. "People need to see the whole thing, not just the sound bites." He nodded, then let it show everything: the mistakes and the correction, the discomfort and the resolution. Change doesn't mean much if you only show the easy parts. The landing gear thudded into place. The lights brightened. Outside, the city's lights stretched toward the horizon like a web of gold. Inside, the passengers straightened in their seats, bags tucked under arms and feet braced for touchdown. The aircraft touched down smoothly, the reverse thrusters humming low before fading into taxi speed. Marcus felt the small jolt of the wheels meeting the ground and allowed himself a quiet breath of relief. The flight had ended without further drama, but the impact of its beginning would last far longer than the trip itself. As they approached the gate, Captain Foster's voice came over the intercom once more. "On behalf of Sky Nova Airlines and our crew, thank you for flying with us. We hope to see you again soon." Marcus gathered his portfolio and stood when the seatbelt sign went off. A few passengers offered quiet goodbyes as he stepped into the aisle. Hannah caught up with him near the door. "You know, you've probably just changed their careers," she said. "Hopefully I've changed their perspective," Marcus replied. "Careers will follow." The jet bridge hummed with the faint whir of machinery as it connected to the aircraft. The familiar chime rang out, and passengers began to gather their belongings, the shuffling of bags and jackets filling the cabin. Marcus Ellison remained seated for a moment, watching the slow procession toward the open door. He could feel the weight of what had just happened hanging in the air like static before a storm. Linda Carver moved briskly through the aisle, assisting an elderly couple with their carry-on bags. Her voice was quiet, her tone markedly different from the clipped confidence she had displayed during boarding. Marcus noticed her avoiding direct eye contact with him, as though she was still processing both the humiliation and the strange opportunity she had been given. Hannah Kim slung her bag over her shoulder and waited in the aisle near Marcus's row. "You walking out last, or you gonna let people see you first?" she asked. Marcus gave a faint, almost amused smile. "Let them go first. I'm not the main event. The point was never me, it was what happens next." The line thinned until only a few passengers remained. As Marcus finally rose, a man in his mid-30s, wearing a charcoal blazer, stepped forward from row 6. "Mr. Ellison," he said, extending a hand. "I work in corporate HR for another airline. I just wanted to say that was one of the most effective real-time interventions I've ever seen. If you'd be open to it, I'd like to discuss how we can implement something similar where I work." Marcus shook his hand firmly. "Send me an email. I'll make sure you have the framework by the end of the week." By the time Marcus stepped into the jet bridge, the cool terminal air wrapped around him, tinged with that sterile scent of climate control and faint coffee from a nearby kiosk. Cameras were already waiting small, discreet devices in the hands of passengers who had deplaned ahead of him. A few angled for a quick photo, others whispered his name. He ignored the flashes and moved toward the arrival's concourse. The click of his shoes echoed on the polished floor as Hannah kept pace beside him. "Media's going to hit you hard tonight," she said quietly. "You'll have interviews lined up before you get home. Then I'll answer them." Marcus replied, "This isn't a moment to hide from. It's a moment to set the record straight." They reached the end of the concourse where a Sky Nova operations manager stood waiting, a tall man in a navy suit with a pinched expression. "Mr. Ellison," he began, "we've been informed of the incident on board. Corporate is reviewing your actions." Marcus's voice cut cleanly through the sentence. "No need for review. I am corporate. And as of 1 hour ago, so are the policies I announced on that aircraft." The manager blinked, caught between protocol and the reality of the hierarchy in front of him. "Understood, sir. We'll make the necessary notifications. Do that, and send a memo to every regional manager by midnight. I want no confusion about what's been implemented." The man nodded quickly and moved off, already pulling out his phone. Marcus and Hannah made their way toward the security exit. As they stepped into the baggage claim area, the noise hit a wave of murmurs, the rolling wheels of suitcases, the occasional overhead announcement. Several passengers from the flight spotted Marcus again, some giving discreet nods, others still clearly talking about the confrontation. A young woman in a red scarf approached hesitantly. "Mr. Ellison, I'm a journalism student at NYU. I saw everything on Hannah's stream. Would you mind if I asked one question?" Marcus stopped. "Go ahead. Do you think this will actually change anything in the long term?" He held her gaze. "Yes, if the people who witnessed it hold the system accountable. Change doesn't survive in the dark. It needs people to keep the light on." She smiled, thanked him, and retreated into the crowd. They reached the curb where a black sedan idled, the driver stepping forward to open the door. Before getting in, Marcus looked back toward the terminal. From this vantage, the glass facade reflected the evening lights of the city, the constant churn of travelers moving in and out. "Do you ever get tired of being the one who has to push?" Hannah asked from the sidewalk. Marcus considered the question as he slid into the car. "Every time," he admitted, "but I get tired faster when I see nothing change." The ride into the city was quiet at first. Marcus sat back, scrolling through emails on his phone. Already, 3 major news outlets had reached out for comment. His assistant had flagged a request from a civil rights advocacy group to collaborate on a public awareness campaign. About halfway to Manhattan. Hannah broke the silence. "You realize, don't you, that you've just put Sky Nova under the microscope for months? Every little slip, every misstep they'll be watching." "That's the point," Marcus said without looking up from his phone. "If scrutiny makes them do the right thing, then let them feel the heat." Traffic thickened as they crossed into the heart of the city. Neon signs blurred against the tinted windows. Marcus finally set his phone down, the fatigue from the day catching up to him in a slow wave. He thought back to the look on Linda's face, the shift in the captain's voice, the way passengers had leaned in to listen. This wasn't over. It couldn't be. A policy on paper was one thing, behavior in practice was another, and he knew exactly how easily organizations could slip back into old patterns once the headlines faded. When they reached his apartment building, Marcus stepped out into the cool night air. The doorman greeted him warmly, and he returned the nod before heading inside. In the quiet of his private elevator, he let himself exhale. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Calls with department heads, training schedules drafted, meetings with advocacy leaders. The policies were a start, but they had to live beyond the crisis that birthed them. As the elevator doors opened into his penthouse, Marcus walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The lights stretched endlessly, each one a reminder of the countless stories unfolding at any given moment, some loud, some quiet, all deserving of fairness. For a brief moment, he let himself imagine a future where incidents like today's didn't happen, where people boarded flights, took their seats, and were met only with the simple human decency owed to them. It was a long way off, but tonight, at least, the path forward had been marked. Morning light poured through the wide windows of Marcus Ellison's office, casting sharp reflections on the polished oak table. The skyline of Manhattan stretched behind him, crisp against a pale blue sky. On his desk, 2 phones were buzzing constantly, one for corporate communications, the other his personal line. Both were full of missed calls, messages, and urgent notifications. Hannah Kim sat across from him, her laptop open and streaming a live feed of morning news coverage. Every major network was running some version of the same headline: CEO removed from first-class seat changes airline policy mid-flight. A still image of Marcus, standing in the cabin aisle with his tablet in hand, had become the defining photo of the story. "They're calling it the Sky Nova incident," Hannah said, her tone halfway between amazement and disbelief. "Your video has 8 million views in less than 12 hours. It's trending in 13 countries." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his fingers loosely laced together. "And what are the comments like? Half are calling you a hero. The other half, they're debating whether you embarrass the crew unnecessarily." "That's expected," Marcus replied evenly. "People defend what they're comfortable with. Discomfort makes them question themselves." Hannah tilted her screen so he could see. A clip of his calm voice saying, "This isn't about punishing you. It's about making sure you see a person first," was being replayed on a loop. The caption read, "Leadership in real time." Before Marcus could respond, his corporate phone rang again. He glanced at the screen and answered. "Ellison, Marcus, it's Daniel Ford from the Sky Nova board," came the voice on the other end, brisk and urgent. "We're feeling the shock waves already. Regional managers are getting calls from journalists and advocacy groups. Stock prices are steady for now, but if we don't control the narrative, we could lose investor confidence." Marcus's voice stayed calm. "Then we control it by owning it. The incident happened, and it exposed a flaw in the company culture. We address it publicly and directly. No hedging. Do you realize how rare it is for someone in your position to do what you did on that flight?" Ford asked. "Yes," Marcus said, "and that's the problem." They talked through logistics media briefings, a joint press release, and an upcoming interview with a national news anchor. When Marcus hung up, Hannah was still watching him closely. "You're not nervous at all, are you?" she asked. Marcus gave a faint smile. "I've been through tougher rooms than a TV studio. At least the anchor won't be trying to physically remove me from my seat." They both chuckled softly, but beneath it, the gravity of the day's work settled in. This was no longer about a single flight. The incident had become a symbol, and symbols had momentum that could either fizzle or ignite. By mid-morning, Marcus was seated in the green room of a major news network. A producer adjusted his mic, her hands trembling slightly. "I just want to say," she murmured, "I saw your video. My father went through something similar when I was a kid. He never got an apology. Thank you for speaking up." Marcus met her eyes. That's why this matters. When the interview began, the anchor wasted no time. "Mr. Ellison, viewers have seen the viral clip, but can you walk us through what was going through your mind when you were told to give up your seat?" Marcus spoke with the same measured tone he'd used on the plane, He described the moment. The quiet decision not to argue in anger, but to hold the line with dignity, and how he had used the time to think about the systemic problem rather than just the personal insult. Some have accused you of using your power to humiliate the crew. The anchor pressed. I used my position to create change, Marcus corrected. If people are uncomfortable with that, I would ask them to imagine if it had happened to someone without the authority or resources I have. Would they have had any recourse at all? The anchor nodded slowly. The segment ended with Marcus outlining the 5 new policies, and by the time he stepped off set, his phone was vibrating with new messages of support. Back in the car, Hannah was scrolling through live reactions. Airline unions are already debating your reforms. Some flight attendants are saying this is exactly what they need to keep bad actors from ruining the job for everyone else. That's a good sign, Marcus said. If the people who do the work see the value, then the change has a better chance of sticking. That afternoon, Marcus met with the leadership team of Ellison Global Logistics. They gathered in the sleek conference room, the tension high. Some were concerned about the distraction from core business operations. Others saw the potential for strengthening corporate reputation through advocacy. Marcus addressed them all. What happened on that flight is not separate from our work, it's connected. We move people and goods around the world. That means we have a responsibility to ensure the systems we touch operate with fairness. If we fail to address that, we fail at our mission. By the end of the meeting, the team had unanimously agreed to endorse the SkyNova reforms publicly and to partner with other logistics companies to push for similar policies in allied industries. That evening, Marcus returned to his apartment, weary but focused. He stood again at the window, the city buzzing below. His phone pinged with a message from an unknown number. I was on your flight yesterday. I didn't speak to you then, but I want you to know you changed how I see things. I'll remember that. He set the phone down, letting the words settle. The media storm was far from over, but Marcus knew storms could clear the air. And this one, he intended to ride until the horizon shifted. The quiet hum of the city evening seeped through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Marcus Ellison's penthouse. The skyline glittered, a sea of lights pulsing with life far below, oblivious to the momentous shift that had begun miles above on a single flight. Marcus sat at his desk, the glow of his laptop illuminating a focused face that had borne the weight of the past 12 hours with quiet determination. He scrolled through the latest reports from SkyNova Airlines customer satisfaction scores, complaint logs, and early data from the new anonymous feedback system he had mandated. The numbers told a hopeful story. Passenger complaints about bias had already dropped significantly. Initial responses to the bias awareness training were positive, and morale among the crew was slowly improving. This was only the beginning, but it was enough to affirm the path forward. He leaned back, eyes drifting to a simple framed boarding pass resting on the shelf Seat 2A, his seat on the flight that had become a catalyst for change, a small reminder that sometimes the smallest things could spark the biggest transformations. His thoughts wandered to the passengers he had seen that day, the skeptical eyes, the quiet nods, the unseen courage it took to watch a CEO stand calmly in a seat where he was questioned, and to demand dignity not as a privilege but as a right. He knew that real change didn't come from headlines or viral videos. It came from sustained commitment and willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. His phone buzzed softly. A message from Hannah Kim appeared on screen. just watched your interview again. You're inspiring a lot of people. What's next?" Marcus smiled to himself. "The next step," he typed back, "is to make sure no one ever has to prove they belong where they have a ticket to sit." He tapped open a new document, starting to draft a company-wide message to be sent at dawn. His fingers paused over the keyboard as he considered the words carefully. "Respect isn't something to be earned by appearance or status," he wrote. "It is a fundamental expectation. It is the foundation of our business and the promise we make to every customer who chooses to fly with us." Outside, the city lights flickered in the gentle breeze, a subtle reminder of the millions of stories unfolding each night, stories of courage, of small victories, of the ongoing struggle for dignity. Marcus thought about the countless passengers who would never know his name, but would feel the impact of today's change and how they were treated. Those were the stories that mattered most. He closed his laptop and stood, moving toward the window once again. The skyline stretched endlessly, but in that vastness, Marcus felt a quiet certainty. Change was possible. Change was happening. But it required every voice, his voice, Hannah's voice, the voices of thousands of passengers, crew members, and advocates who refused to accept prejudice as the norm. He knew what he had to do. "Speak up," he whispered to the city below. "Speak up for those who can't." And with that, Marcus Ellison committed himself anew to the journey ahead, not as a CEO, not just as a man who had been removed from a seat, but as a catalyst for lasting transformation. The journey would be long, filled with setbacks and challenges, but it was worth every step, because dignity is not negotiable, because respect is not reserved for the privileged few, because every person deserves to be seen and treated as they truly are. And that was a story worth telling. Marcus Ellison's story reminds us that dignity is not a privilege reserved for a few, it is a fundamental right for all. His calm courage in the face of discrimination on a plane sparked more than just a delayed flight. It ignited a movement toward accountability, empathy, and meaningful change in an industry long plagued by bias. But this isn't just Marcus's victory. It's a call to every one of us to see beyond assumptions, to challenge injustice quietly yet firmly, and to demand respect for every human being regardless of race, appearance, or status. Discrimination wears many faces, but so does courage, the courage to speak up, to hold systems accountable, and to believe that transformation is possible. If this story touched you, inspired you, or made you think, please like this video, share it to spread awareness, and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that shine a light on injustice and celebrate human resilience. Together, we can build a world where respect is given freely, dignity is honored always, and no one is forced to prove they belong. Thank you for watching. Stay strong, stay compassionate, and we'll see you in the next story.